August 27th, 1896, a tropical paradise at the edge of empire, becomes the stage for the fastest war in human history. In just 38 minutes, a throne will fall, a palace will burn, and an empire will flex its power like never before. This is not just a war, it's a story of pride, betrayal, and a kingdom swallowed whole before the world could even blink. To understand how an island so small could defy the might of Britain, we must begin with Zanzibar itself. A paradise glittering with spices, ivory, and gold, but hiding secrets that would ignite the shortest war the world has ever known. It is 1896, and Zanzibar gleams like a crown upon the waters of the Indian Ocean. Its harbors bustle with dhows and steamships, carrying ivory, slaves, and above all cloves, the spice that perfumes the world. To visiting traders, diplomats, and explorers, the island looks like paradise itself. White coral palaces rising against turquoise waters, the air thick with incense and promise. But beauty is often a mask. Behind the carved wooden doors of Stone Town's winding alleys, whispers fester. Zanzibar is not just a crossroads of trade, it is a throne forever on the edge of betrayal. The Sultanate's power rests uneasily between two giants, Britain and Germany, empires whose shadows stretch across Africa like grasping hands. The Sultan rules in name, but foreign consuls watch every move, measuring every breath. Gold from cloves fills the royal coffers, but much of it bleeds into European hands. And yet, within the palace walls, the greatest danger is not from abroad, but within. Family rivalries simmer like coals. Cousins eye the throne as if it were a jewel left unattended. Courtiers trade loyalty for whispers and whispers for power. To rule Zanzibar is to sit on a chair balanced over a pit of knives. And then, in late August of 1896, the island's fragile balance shatters. The Sultan, the aging ruler who had kept peace, if only through compromise, suddenly falls ill. By dawn, he is dead. The perfume of cloves cannot mask the stench of suspicion. Did he die of fever, as the court physicians claim, or was poison slipped into his sherbet cup? On the streets, men speak in hushed tones, swearing they heard shouting in the palace the night before. Some say the British had a hand in it, others whisper of family plots. What is certain is this: Zanzibar's throne now stands empty, and whoever dares to seize it will inherit not just a crown, but a storm. The people hold their breath as word spreads across the island. The Sultan is dead, and betrayal walks in the halls of power. The Sultan's sudden death leaves Zanzibar in shock. Courtiers rush through the marble halls, voices low, eyes darting. Britain's consul believes he already knows what comes next: a carefully chosen successor, a pliant ruler who will bow to the empire's will. A sultan in name, but a British puppet in truth. But the palace does not bend so easily. Instead of Britain's candidate, another figure seizes the moment: Sultan Khalid bin Bargash, cousin to the late ruler. Young, ambitious, and unafraid, he does not wait for approval from London. He marches into the palace, declares himself Sultan, and raises the royal standard high above the palace walls. The flag flutters defiantly in the sea breeze, its colors visible across the harbor. The message is unmistakable: Zanzibar has chosen its own ruler. Crowds gather in the winding streets of Stone Town. Some cheer, others whisper nervously. Everyone knows what Khalid's boldness means. He has not just claimed a throne, he has challenged an empire. In the British consulate, outrage boils. To London, Khalid is no sultan, only a usurper who dares to defy the Queen's authority. To allow him to remain would be to show weakness, and weakness is something the empire cannot afford. A letter is sent to the palace, its words like the edge of a blade: step down or face consequences. The message is clear. The empire has spoken, but Khalid does not lower the flag. He does not retreat from the palace walls. Instead, he doubles down, fortifying his claim, bracing himself against the storm. The sun sets over Zanzibar's harbor, casting blood-red light on the palace roof, where the flag still flies. In the silence that follows, one truth grows louder than the surf. War is coming. The palace, once a symbol of royal grandeur, becomes a fortress. Sultan Khalid is no fool. He knows the empire's shadow looms large, and so he prepares for war. His men reinforce the palace gates with heavy timbers. Cannons are hauled into position along the sea walls, and the sound of hammering fills the courtyards. Within hours, the palace transforms into something more than a home. It becomes a barricade against the empire. Khalid rallies 3,000 loyalists, palace guards, local fighters, mercenaries drawn by the promise of gold. They gather in the courtyards with rifles slung across their backs, chanting oaths of loyalty. To his followers, he is the rightful sultan, the man chosen by destiny, not by Britain's decree. And then there is the warship Glasgow, a relic but still formidable, anchored in the harbor as a final show of defiance. But as the palace fills with loyalists, the streets outside fill with something more dangerous: whispers. British agents move through Stone Town in plain clothes, slipping coins into the hands of discontented guards, spreading rumors that Khalid's cause is doomed. A guard's loyalty can be bought. A cannon crew can be bribed to fire late, or not at all. Khalid fortifies his walls, but he cannot see the invisible war being waged beneath his very feet. In the British consulate, the air is thick with impatience. Diplomats and officers gather around polished tables, drafting a single chilling message. At dawn, the ultimatum is delivered: step down by 9 a.m. or face the consequences. It is not a warning. It is a deadline. Night falls heavy over Zanzibar. In the palace, torches burn late into the night as Khalid's men prepare for the inevitable. In the harbor, British warships glide silently into position, their guns trained on the palace walls. The island itself seems to hold its breath, as though the palms and waves know that by tomorrow, history will be written in smoke and fire. The clock ticks toward morning. The ultimatum stands. At 9 a.m., the fate of Zanzibar will be decided. The world's shortest war has not yet begun, but its countdown has. At dawn, the sea turns to glass. Out of the morning mist, British warships slide into the harbor, black silhouettes against the rising sun. Their cannons, cold and gleaming, swing toward the Sultan's palace like the unblinking eyes of predators. The flagship HMS St. George leads the line, followed by Philomel and Raccoon, each bristling with firepower. To the people of Zanzibar, it feels as though the horizon itself has sprouted steel fangs. On the docks and along the winding streets of Stone Town, thousands gather in anxious silence. Mothers clutch their children. Merchants close their stalls. The clove-scented air is now thick with fear. No one speaks it aloud, but everyone knows. If the Sultan does not yield, the city will burn. Some point at the palace's high flagpole, where the royal standard still waves defiantly in the wind. Others whisper of the ultimatum, counting the minutes until 9 o'clock. In the British consulate, the consul Basil Cave watches the palace through a spyglass. His face is stone, his words colder still. He has delivered the ultimatum: surrender by 9 a.m. or face destruction. There is no bluff in his tone. Britain does not threaten, it executes. Inside the palace, Sultan Khalid refuses to move. He paces the halls with a hand on his sword, surrounded by loyal guards. Messengers rush in with frantic reports. Spies in the streets, rumors of bribes. The enemy's cannons aimed directly at them. Still, the Sultan orders the royal flag to remain high. To lower it would be surrender. To surrender would be humiliation. The harbor is silent but for the creak of warship rigging and the cry of gulls circling above. Every eye, British sailor, Zanzibari soldier, trembling civilian turns to the palace clock tower. The hands crawl toward 9. At any other dawn, Zanzibar would awaken to prayer, spice markets, and the hum of daily life. Today, it awakens to the edge of annihilation. The clock strikes 9 o'clock. The world holds its breath. What will come first, surrender or fire? The palace clock tower chimes the 9th hour. For a moment, the world seems frozen. Sailors standing rigid at their guns, soldiers clutching muskets, crowds holding their breath. Sultan Khalid still refuses to yield. The flag above the palace snaps in the wind, proud and defiant. The silence lasts just 2 minutes. Then the sea itself erupts. At 9:02 a.m., British cannons roar in unison. The first volley screams across the harbor, slamming into the palace with earth-shaking force. Marble walls crumble. Wooden beams splinter. Flames leap skyward. The ground shudders beneath Stone Town as if the island itself recoils from the blast. Glass shatters in shop windows. Civilians scatter, screaming through narrow streets. Mothers clutch children and dive for cover as the sky rains fire. Inside the palace, chaos reigns. Guards scramble to return fire from outdated cannons, their shots falling short into the water. Smoke chokes the corridors. Chandeliers crash to the floor. With each strike, the palace that once symbolized centuries of power buckles further until towers crack and fall in showers of stone. In the harbor, Khalid's prized warship, the HHS Glasgow, tries to respond. Its guns thunder once. Then a British shell tears through its hull. Within minutes, fire races across the deck. Sailors leap into the sea, their uniforms aflame as the vessel lists, then sinks into the bay with a groan of breaking timbers. For the next half hour, Zanzibar becomes a storm of steel. Over 500 shells slam into the palace and surrounding defenses. Entire courtyards vanish in smoke and rubble. Drums of gunpowder ignite, exploding like thunderclaps that shake the city to its bones. Yet still the royal flag refuses to fall. Smoke curls around it, flames lick at its pole, but it remains a lone symbol of defiance against the empire's wrath. By 9:40 a.m., the once magnificent palace is nothing more than smoldering ruins. The warships hold fire at last, their guns silent over the wreckage. The defenders are dead, wounded, or fled. Civilians weep in the streets. The war is over before it truly began. But as the smoke clears, one truth becomes terrifyingly clear. The Sultan is gone, vanished, escaped. Where is Khalid? By the time the last cannon fell silent, the once grand palace of Zanzibar was reduced to rubble. Flames licked the broken stones, pillars lay scattered like bones, and smoke still curled into the sky. The streets outside, only minutes ago filled with panicked crowds, now stood eerily quiet, except for the faint cries of the wounded and the crackle of fire. It had lasted just 38 minutes, the shortest war in history. But in that sliver of time, Zanzibar had been forever changed. The Sultan's 3,000 defenders had melted away, some dead, others deserting into the alleys. The warship that was meant to guard the island lay at the bottom of the harbor, smoke hissing from its broken hull. For Britain, it was a victory so swift it almost seemed absurd. For Zanzibar, it was humiliation wrapped in fire. Merchants stood in the doorways of their ruined shops. Mothers pulled children from the rubble. Smoke stung every eye, and in that smoke hung a heavy truth. Their kingdom had not fallen in a long war of valor, but in less than the length of a market hour. In whispers, people asked, was this even a war, or just a punishment disguised as one? And yet amid the wreckage, one absence screamed louder than the cannon fire. The Sultan was gone. The palace was destroyed, his soldiers scattered, yet Khalid had slipped the net. No body was found among the rubble. No captive was dragged before the victors. To the astonishment of all, the man who had defied the empire had simply vanished. The Union Jack now fluttered triumphantly over Zanzibar. The empire claimed victory. The palace lay in ruins, and the city bent beneath the weight of foreign rule. But in the hushed streets and broken homes, one question echoed like a ghost. Where is the Sultan who dared defy Britain? When the cannons fell silent, all that remained of the Sultan's palace was a blackened skeleton of stone. Soldiers searched the ruins, their boots crunching on shattered marble, but the throne room was empty. No crown, no corpse, nothing. The Sultan had vanished as if swallowed by the smoke. Witnesses whispered of shadows darting through the alleys. Some swore they saw him disguised as a servant, slipping past guards. Others claimed he fled through a secret passage beneath the palace, an escape route carved generations earlier for desperate kings. By the time the British realized he was gone, Khalid was already out of reach. But his escape was not random. It was calculated. Khalid fled not into hiding among his people, but straight into the arms of the one rival power bold enough to defy Britain, Germany. Behind the gates of the German consulate, the defiant Sultan found refuge. Now, a strange scene unfolded in Zanzibar. Britain claimed victory, its flag flying over the smoking palace. Yet the man who had started the war sat smugly under German protection, untouchable. For the British, it was infuriating. How could they boast of conquest when the Sultan who defied them was still alive, watching from behind foreign walls? Their triumph suddenly felt hollow, incomplete. To the people of Zanzibar, Khalid's escape turned him from a defeated ruler into a legend, a ghost king who had slipped past the empire's grasp. The Union Jack may have risen over Zanzibar, but whispers spread through the streets. The Sultan lives, and where he hides, the shadow of Germany looms. Inside the stone walls of the German consulate, Sultan Khalid sat as though untouchable. Outside, British soldiers patrolled the streets of Zanzibar, seething at their hollow victory. They had toppled his palace, burned his warship, scattered his army. Yet the man who dared defy them was now smiling behind German gates. Britain demanded Khalid's surrender. The German consul refused. His orders were clear: protect the Sultan at all costs. Suddenly, Zanzibar, this tiny jewel of the Indian Ocean, became the stage for a dangerous game between two of the world's greatest powers. Every carriage that rattled down the cobblestones, every ship that entered the harbor carried suspicion. Was this still about one man's throne, or the balance of empires? Crowds whispered that if the British stormed the German compound, it would not just be the end of Zanzibar's defiance, it would be the spark for war between Europe's giants. Rival flags now fluttered across the same city, their shadows falling across the same streets. The tension was unbearable. One wrong move, one reckless shot, and the shortest war in history could ignite into a global firestorm. In hushed meetings by lantern light, diplomats scrambled to cool the flames. Britain could not afford open war with Germany over a single sultan. Germany, too, weighed its pride against the cost of conflict. And so, a secret bargain was struck. Khalid would be allowed to flee Zanzibar under German protection, carried away across the sea before the British could touch him. The Union Jack still flew over Zanzibar, but whispers spread in every alleyway. The Sultan had slipped the noose, and Germany had shown the world that even the Empire of Britain could be defied. When the smoke cleared and the cannons fell silent, Britain wasted no time. A new Sultan was chosen, not by the people of Zanzibar, not even by its nobles, but by the signatures of British officials. Hamud bin Mohammed, pliant and eager to please, was seated on the throne. His crown gleamed, but everyone knew it was a crown borrowed, not earned. Under Hamud's rule, Zanzibar bent to the will of the empire. Treaties flowed like shackles, trade concessions, naval rights, and taxes, all designed to funnel Zanzibar's wealth into British coffers. Where Khalid once promised defiance, Hamud offered obedience. To London, it was a triumph. To the people of Zanzibar, it was a humiliation. But even as British officers marched through the palace halls, another name was spoken in the bazaars, in the spice fields, and in the crowded harbors. Khalid. He had escaped. He was alive. And to many that made him more dangerous than ever. Children whispered of the Sultan who had stood against the empire. Fishermen swore that one day he would return with German ships at his back. Every rumor kept the legend burning, a flame Britain could not extinguish. Hamoud, the puppet Sultan, knew the truth. He ruled only by Britain's grace. Every decree was shadowed by an English advisor. Every decision carried the weight of foreign approval. His throne stood tall in the palace, but its foundation was built on sand. The people bowed to him, yes, but their hearts were with the Sultan who had defied an empire, not the one who bowed to it. And so Zanzibar lived in two realities, one where Britain claimed victory, and another where the ghost of Khalid haunted every street. The shortest war in history was over, but for the people, the true battle of pride and identity had only just begun. History books would record it in cold precision. August 27, 1896, 38 minutes of war. From the first cannon blast at 9:02 a.m. to the final silence before 9:40, an empire had flexed its muscle and a kingdom had bent beneath it. No other war in human history would be shorter. Yet brevity hides the truth, for within those minutes lay the collapse of a dynasty, the humiliation of a people, and the arrogance of an empire that could crush resistance in less than an hour. Zanzibar was never the same. Once a jewel of the Indian Ocean, it became a pearl set in Britain's imperial crown. Its palaces were rebuilt not as symbols of independence, but as reminders of obedience. Its sultan was no longer chosen by birthright or tradition, but appointed by London's will. The island's wealth, ivory, spices, and trade flowed outward, enriching an empire that ruled oceans but left Zanzibar diminished. But beneath the surface, pride still burned. The people remembered the day their sultan defied the empire. Even in defeat, Khalid's name lingered like incense in the bazaars. The irony was inescapable. Britain had won a war, but not the hearts of the conquered. The empire claimed glory, but the legend belonged to Zanzibar. A legend that said, even if for less than an hour, an island dared to stand against the greatest naval power on Earth. Over time, the war became more than history. It became myth, a story told with disbelief, as if no war so short could be real. Yet it was real, carved into the stones of the palace ruins and etched into the memory of empire. In the end, Britain claimed victory, but Zanzibar claimed immortality. The war lasted only 38 minutes, but its legacy still whispers through time. It reminds us that history is not measured only in the length of battles, but in the weight of defiance. The empire may have won the war, but the legend of the Sultan who refused to bow, of a kingdom that stood against the tide, even briefly, still outlives the empire that sought to erase it.